Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I'm 12 Kyle. Check this out. On this podcast, what we're going to talk about is COVID-19. More specifically, we're going to actually do a deep dive into COVID-19 with a twist. I have a special co-host on this particular podcast, Dr. Jimmell Felder. She is not only one of the best pediatricians in the world, she happens to be one of my best friends. So she's going to talk a little bit about the COVID experience, talk about the vaccines that are out now, and shed some light on some of the disparities, and also talk about her apprehension into getting the COVID vaccine shot as well. So sit tight. After the break, I will present to you COVID-19 with Dr. Jimmell Felder here on the 12 Kyle podcast. Let's get it. Welcome back. As I mentioned in the intro, we have a special guest on this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Again, I am your host, 12 Kyle. Special guest. This guest, first time on the podcast. She is a mother. She is a wife. She is one of the best pediatricians in the world. She used to be my BFF, but she's now Sharice's BFF, which is my wife. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the 12 Kyle podcast for the first time, Dr. Jimmell Felder. Dr. Felder, what's up?
Hello, how are you?
Or should I call you Dr. Jimmell? Which one do you prefer?
Well, really, Dr. Felder, because that's my professional name.
Oh, excuse me, Dr. Felder. I'm sorry. Excuse me. Well, Dr. Felder then.
Yes. Dr. Felder Pacing. I'm doing great. And I know that you have lots of listeners, so I'm so super excited and honored to be here.
Yes. And I'm definitely honored to have you here. Like I said, a little background. I've known her probably since I was like 8 years old. We've been friends forever. She is the.
It's about 5, right? Remember we did that Delta pageant together.
Yeah, that's right. So we're a little older, but we go way back. She is the godmother of our oldest son, and we are the godparents of her oldest son. So we're the best of friends. She, like I said, she was my BFF, but maybe we'll get into that a little later.
I'm still your BFF, Kyle. Stop now.
Anyway, so I got you on the podcast because obviously we're talking about something a little more serious than normal, than what I talk about here on the podcast. Obviously, we were talking about COVID. And I wanted to get you on because obviously you're someone who is a professional and you see it and are involved with it every day. You're not Dr. Fauci, but you know a lot. And so I definitely.
Well, Dr. Fauci, all doctors, most doctors who have any sense revere Dr. Fauci because he's a very intelligent, very smart individual. And he's been in the game for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so, no, I'm by no means a Dr. Fauci.
But you're up there. But I like Dr. Fauci too. He seems to be really knowledgeable and very cool too as well. So as far as COVID goes, obviously we're in this pandemic and it's been going on at the time of this recording. It's been over a year now.
Right.
Let's go back. When did you first hear about COVID? And it's a 2-part question. And how serious did you take it?
I think like with everybody, you first heard about it when it was first diagnosed in China. Mm-hmm. I don't think we took it as seriously as we should have until about maybe January when it hit here out in Washington. I think it was late January, early February. I might have those wrong. Mm-hmm. But, when the outbreaks made it to the United States, I think that's when people pay attention. I mean, just like other things that go on the atrocities and things that go on all around the world. But when it hits your front door, that's when you pay more attention, I believe. That's just human nature, I think.
Yeah, I think there's something to that because, okay, I'm getting some feedback. Okay, well, let me see. Okay, 1, 2, okay. Okay, yeah. I think there's something to that. I think you have, you hit the nail on the head. I think for me, it was much like that. I heard about it, but to me, it sounded like something that was, really far away. And I think probably by the end of February, early March is when right before everything shut down, I was like, oh, so this is serious. Like, what do you mean we're not going into the office anymore? Like, we're going to be at home? Like, I took it serious, but, I didn't envision any of this. I'm sure nobody else did.
Yeah, I think most Americans took it more seriously when it affected them personally, like jobs and the shutdown and staying at home, the stay-at-home orders and those kind of things. For people in the medical professional, though, I think we probably were a little nervous when the outbreaks were starting because, anytime there's an outbreak, you're thinking that it could, spread. And is this the early signs of a pandemic, And so I think for those of us in the medical field, we may have been alerted to it a little bit sooner, that it may have been more serious than at first believed to be. But of course, when all the mandatory shutdowns, then everybody was like, oh no, this is serious. That hadn't, happened in our lifetime. So.
No doubt. So when the pandemic happened and we had, like you said, the mandatory shutdowns, did you or could you have ever envisioned, even in the medical profession, could you have ever envisioned it being this long, as far as us being in this pandemic, for it going to the better part of a year now?
Well, that's the sad part about things. History repeats itself. So if you go back 100 years to the pandemic, the Spanish flu in 1918, yes, that was the better part of a year, 2 years. And also a war was going on at the same time. And so if you look at history, as we often say, history repeats itself. And, in medicine, we say that there will be cycles of pandemics and epidemics. And so, you don't know when the next one will be, but sure, there's always the possibility that one will arise. I mean, the last one I think of in recent time was the H1N1 with the swine flu for us in the United States, but there have been SARS and infections, over Ebola and stuff like that. So, I mean, when it affects us, that's when we take notice. So I think the main one we remember, and it was not quite as large as, when not by far, was I think H1N1, and that was early in my career. That came that summer. Right. And we started seeing the flu in the summertime.
So I guess the next question I have is, when it comes to the medical profession, because we don't really hear a lot. Like I watch the news, and there would be, stories about how the medical profession is affected, but never really deep dives. Because I mean, if you're watching the news, you only got, maybe 6 or 7 minutes to cover a particular story. But how has it impacted the medical community? Because obviously, those are the people that are on the front lines. Those are the people that are risking their lives every day, every single day, day in and day out. And, to be honest, those are the thankless heroes, because, a lot of times they are the last ones, for some, the last ones to make contact with a loved one or friend or family member that passes away in the ICU room or whatever the case may be. How has this really affected the medical community? Because I would guess that it would, be very stressful and kind of stretch them thin, if you will.
Right. So I'll answer that in a twofold question. I'll say from my perspective, and then I'll say from others' perspective, meaning like the ones that are on the front line. So for me as a pediatrician, the way it changed the way we practice medicine is that in the blink of an eye, really, like overnight, we had to change the way we did our office workflow. We also had to change the way we saw patients. So, for instance, we transitioned heavily to telemedicine, and that was something that was not really utilized a lot in medicine prior to the pandemic. There were certain pockets where telemedicine was helpful, sometimes in coverage for ICUs and things of that nature. But a widespread use of telemedicine, I would say, was one of the transformative things that happened in medicine for the everyday practitioner. So we started seeing a lot of people through telemedicine video visits. And then we also changed our office workflow. So for pediatricians, and we still do this, in the mornings, we only see well children. And then in the afternoons, those were kind of specifically for sick kids. And then probably a couple of months ago, probably, I guess 5 or 6 months ago now, we started seeing a small handful of children in the morning that were sick, just for purposes of convenience for families that didn't want to wait to the afternoon because their child was really sick. So we see about a handful of people in the morning too. The call doctor does. So we changed the way we did our call rotation. We changed the way we did inpatient nursery rounds. We changed the way we saw patients. We changed our office workflow. And of course, we had to use PPE on mostly everybody. So in pediatrics, everybody comes in with all of the symptoms for COVID, and you don't know if they have it or not. And prior to us having a test in our office, you had to treat everybody as if they may have, COVID-19. So now that is, certainly not the case. And we've transitioned back to seeing more patients in person. And now that we have the test in our office, it's easier to do that because you can test them before they come in. Not that those tests are 100%, but they give you a little bit better they give you a little bit better calm feeling, like it's okay for them to be brought in your office, I guess is the way I'm trying to say it. And then on the flip side, the other part of the question is for healthcare workers in general. I'll speak specifically to my husband, who is an internal medicine physician, who is really on the front lines, really on the front lines, seeing people in the ICU, diagnosed with COVID in ICU for weeks on end, on the ventilators and those kind of things. It's exhausting, I think, for them mentally, physically, emotionally, that toll, especially in the height of the surges when, there's no visitation allowed, and you're in there seeing patients day in and day out. We came into medicine to heal people and save people. And in certain circumstances, a lot of these people cannot be saved no matter what we do. And so we've gotten better. The research and the treatment regimens have evolved, and we know a lot more than we did when the pandemic started. But as you can imagine, if you're seeing so many sick people day in and day out, that will definitely take a toll.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's that I know that would weigh heavy on someone's head and their heart as well, because it's just like, you want to do everything in your power to help someone, and then the last thing you want to do is see them sick or, unfortunately have them leave the earth.
Right.
So, and I know that's got to be tough and, like I said, stressful. So we've moved on and we went through that in March, and it got worse and worse and worse, and things, didn't really look like they were getting any better. And then probably somewhere over the summer, there, became word that there was going to be some vaccines available and that they were working on vaccines. So I want to talk a little bit about the vaccines. At the time of this recording, the vaccines are now here. So
right.
I have a two-part question. When did you get vaccinated? And did you experience any side effects when you got vaccinated?
So I'll just do a little intro into the vaccines, just so so we can all be on the same page. So there are currently 3 FDA-approved vaccines: the Pfizer vaccine and the Moderna vaccines. Pfizer was the first one to get FDA approval, followed by Moderna, and then most recently J&J, the Janssen vaccine. And so the first 2, Pfizer and Moderna, are mRNA vaccines, messenger RNA vaccines, which is a newer technology, but it's not new in the fact that it's been used in research for decades. And then the more traditional vaccine is the J&J Janssen vaccine, uses a vector technology, And all that means is they use a different virus to kind of invade into the cell to get the vaccine particles that will be used to make the protein, the spike protein that the body sees as foreign. That's the older technology that we've used for vaccines for most of the vaccines use that technology. And so at the time of this recording, there are 3, and I got my vaccine in December. I got the Pfizer vaccine because that's what my hospital was offering. And my side effects were none after the first vaccine, and then had terrible side effects after the second vaccine, which included just a bad headache was my main side effect. And but lots of people have reactions to this. And basically it's because your immune system sees something that is foreign and your immune system is working. And so that's what the side effects entail, that your immune system is doing something, having some kind of reaction to what it is seen as foreign. So that means your immune system is working very well. Now, some people do well and don't have any side effects, but a lot of people do have side effects, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't get the vaccine, because you certainly could take a headache or any other minor side effects better than just getting COVID-19, even though, I mean, you could have a mild case or you could have a severe case. So, why take the chance when there's very effective, 3 very effective vaccines out there that you could possibly get and have immunity that way.
Indeed. I've had my first shot, and by the time this airs, I would have had my second shot. I have my second shot on April 7th, so
Okay.
it's coming up. So,
Okay.
and I got the Moderna vaccine.
Okay.
All
right.
I will tell the audience what I told you. I didn't really have any interest in getting the vaccine until I talked to you. It wasn't until I talked to you, and then I talked to my cousin Donald, who's also a physician. I didn't really know, and then I think one of the things that I learned from our conversation, I said, well, let me just do, because you said something about do some research, and so I was like, okay, I took that bit of advice, and I just kind of did my own research as far as, and I think probably more than anything else, I was letting outside noise kind of affect my decision. I'll be the first to admit that it's a personal decision. I mean, everybody's
Right.
not going to get vaccinated.
Right.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you as well, I know you mentioned the 3 that are out now. Is one more better than the other?
So I would say, now I'm going to take the Dr. Fauci approach. If you have an opportunity to get any of the vaccines, all of the vaccines are quite effective. So, people look at the percentage rates, and the Moderna is 94% effective, I believe, and Pfizer's 95%. And then there's that 72 number that they have for J&J, which, they may do a second dose at some point. But 72% is good because it protects you against moderate to severe disease of coronavirus infection. So I don't think you should be choosy at this point. I think you should just get whatever is available in your area to have some sort of immunity from coronavirus.
Now you say you choose, but I gotta admit I was very choosy. I did not want the J&J. I said I had to search, and I found a place, a local grocery store that was doing the vaccinations, and it wasn't in my area, whatever like that, where I could get a quick appointment, but. I wanted either Moderna or Pfizer. They had Moderna, so that's what I went with. My wife, Sharice, Jamell's BFF, she got the Pfizer vaccine. She got the Pfizer vaccine, and she just had her second shot. So you're right. It is very effective. no matter which one you get. Now, one other question I had for you was when you talk about, the origin of these, I guess we probably should go with Moderna and Pfizer. These vaccines were around before 2020, correct?
Not these specific vaccines.
Okay.
So what you're alluding to, you're talking about the technology that was used to create the vaccine.
Yes.
So, so what I alluded to a little bit earlier was that, people talk about, so I'll just back up and say for me personally too, I had no interest in getting the vaccine. Everything under the sun, excuse you could come up with is too new. It was developed too fast. I don't know if I'm going to get, a third eye. Is it going to mess with my DNA? Is it going to make me get infected with coronavirus? So, all these different myths. And for me personally, I didn't have all of those. I just felt like it was a new technology and it hadn't been out long enough. But turns out messenger RNA technology has been used for a long time. And so basically in research, they've been trying to hone this technology since the early 2000s. And so they have really tried to use it in trying to develop technology with flu vaccines, with rabies vaccines. They used it for Zika virus when that was out. They've also tried to use it with cancer and HIV research. So the technology has been out there for a long time, but is now just been used to make this vaccine. And so once I found that out, that it wasn't really a new technology, it had been around for a while, then and understand the way it actually works, then I felt fine with it. Because, not everybody goes to medical school, but once it was explained to me by someone who is very well to do and the know-how, I really understood that this was okay. And then I felt comfortable taking it. And then plus my brother, as you well know, got diagnosed with COVID-19 in December, and it devastated him. And so he is still here, but he has some long-term debilitating effects from it. And since we are in the same gene pool, I just figured I would be better off getting the vaccine instead of seeing how coronavirus would attack my body in such a fashion. So I just said, well, you know what? New technology, old technology, whatnot. I need some immunity from this disease.
No doubt. I totally understand. I'm with you on that. I know we had conversations about it. Seeing it go through, people's families is one thing. Seeing it happen to people that we know or maybe went to school with or whatever the case may be is one thing. But when it hits your family, like it hit your family and then it hit my family too at almost around the same time.
Right.
It almost went through not my immediate family in my house, but like my brother had it. I had an aunt that had it, cousins that had it, and fortunately for us, everybody was okay. When my brother had it, I think he said the worst side effect that he had was he said he was dizzy. He was really, really dizzy one day. He had this cough for the better part of about 4 days, but it really didn't. It went through his house, but it was it was very mild. And so I felt like he dodged a bullet, but I just didn't want to kind of take that chance. So I think that was kind of like a warning sign to me, like, look, okay, when this vaccine becomes available. And then after that, you and I had to talk, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it.
Right.
And so we made a decision, as a family that we were gonna do it. Again, I don't necessarily begrudge anyone who doesn't. I know people are going to make their own decisions. The only thing I will say, especially concerning this podcast as well, do your research and make your own decision from there. Don't go to Twitter. Don't go to, Facebook. I mean, you can use those as resources to get as much information as you need, but ultimately you're going to have to make your own decision. And I think it's very key that you are a medical professional, and you said that you were skeptical about taking the vaccine, and you were in the know. You know what I'm saying? So it's understandable that people will be skeptical about a vaccine, and that was one of the first things that I heard. Like, oh man, they just came up with this like 6 months ago. How you know it's going to work? So
now millions of people have gotten it. So we're I mean, if you will, we're a part of a huge vaccine trial. I mean, in real life. And so millions and millions of people have received the vaccine. The better part of everybody has done well. There have been some severe side effects, but for the most part, everybody has done well. And to date, at the recording, around 148 million people in the United States have received the vaccine. Wow. So that's a pretty good amount. Nowhere near where we need to be. So just for clarification, people are like, well, I'm gonna just wait for herd immunity. That takes at least 70% of people to be vaccinated. And I did a little research. So in DeKalb County, only 6.3% of the people in DeKalb County are fully vaccinated. So y'all got a long way to go where you live for herd immunity to take place.
Well, there's probably a reason for that.
Yes.
I'll just say it like this. I know, like for me, when I was trying to get my appointments and stuff like that, it was hard to find. The vaccine was here. It was here in DeKalb. And for those of you listening, I live in Metro Atlanta. The vaccine was here, but there weren't a lot of appointments as far as like, your pharmacies and your grocery stores and places like that. They have since the time that I actually got my first vaccine shot, they've opened up the scope, so it's more places where it's available. In fact, I've probably over the last 3 days, I've gotten emails from like 5 different places saying, "Hey, we have the vaccines here." In fact, I got my personal doctor. His office sent me an email this morning saying, "Hey, we got the vaccine here. There's no wait. You can come and get it. So we just set up an appointment, whatever the case may be." So it's here. So the vaccines are here. It's just, getting people to get out and get it, which leads me to my next question. You talked a little bit about herd immunity. Herd immunity is where, we all will want to be at some point. In your either personal or professional opinion, how long do you think it's going to take? Because I think there's a lot of people, millions of people that are probably sitting on the fence saying, "Oh, well, I'm going to wait and see what happens." And I get it, because I was one of those people. And they're going to wait and say, okay, well, and it's kind of encouraging, I guess, to some degree, because in some places things are really, really opening up. In other places, things are opening up really, really fast. They may be too fast. So how long do you think it'll be before we can reach herd immunity?
Well, I mean, I'm not Dr. Fauci, right? So we've already said that part. So I don't know. It depends on a lot of factors. It depends on how many people take the vaccine. That's how we're going to get herd immunity. And of course, people who've had, coronavirus naturally. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know how long it's going to take. What would speed it up is if children, I'm a pediatrician, so if children were able to get vaccinated, that would speed up the herd immunity process. If people felt safe enough to give their children a vaccine. So, but the trials have just started for children. So Pfizer is doing some trials in younger kids. Moderna is doing some trials in the younger kids. I don't know how long that process is going to take before we feel comfortable vaccinating children. But that would certainly speed up the herd immunity process. And so herd immunity the definition is the amount of people in a population that has to have either vaccination or have had natural immunity from a disease. The percent of the population that needs to have those two in order for the disease to pretty much kind of go away in the population. So you just really don't want to leave it to herd immunity, because we've got a long way to go for that, folks. And so, I mean, I really encourage you, even though the cases are going down, the hospitalizations are going down, things are opening up. And so that means we'll probably see some surges as people are kind of really burned out about being stuck at home and not doing anything. And I think people are just fatigued and tired and really want to get out there and start living life again as normal. But as that happens, we'll probably see more surges, unfortunately, until we can get to that point. And so, like I said, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know when that will be. But the faster people will get their vaccine, that would definitely help.
Indeed. So kids, you mentioned as far as that would speed up the process. So I'm wondering, will it do? Okay, this is a parenting question because I don't think I don't know that you can necessarily answer this as a medical profession. But could you see a time where it would be something? Because I think this is going to happen at some point where, you know how it was when we were coming up in the 80s, where we had to get vaccinated to go to school. Like it was a shot. It was certain shots that you had to have before you went to school.
Yeah.
Do you think eventually we will have the COVID shot will be a shot for kids to go to school?
Oh, I would say probably no. I mean, at this point, that's a very tricky question, right? So there are mandatory vaccines for kids to go to school, and then there are recommended vaccines. So we recommend that everybody get the flu shot every year, but just because your child doesn't get the flu shot, that doesn't mean they can't attend school. So to me, it seems like this coronavirus will act more like a flu vaccine, and we'll have to maybe get a coronavirus booster every year like we did the flu vaccine. And in that case, that would suggest that it wouldn't be required. It would be recommended, just like the flu vaccine is. So you're not required to have the flu vaccine. But most schools, you're required to get measles, mumps, rubella. You're required to get your hepatitis B, your DTaP, all of those beautiful childhood immunizations that we know work very well. So, I don't know. I think only time will tell on what kind of disease this is going to evolve into being and what the vaccination process in the future will look like. But before we do leave, I do want to address something, health disparities, in the fact that, we're minorities are more likely to contract COVID-19 as well as die from it. And so while that's a disparity, meaning we don't make up that much of the U.S. population, we make up a smaller percentage of that, I do want to address some people's mistrust of medicine in general, minority groups. That's a real fear. And I think that when I speak to people about health disparities and reluctancy, we call it vaccine hesitancy, meaning people aren't necessarily gung-ho about taking the vaccine. As you and I both, Black individuals, we both had, reservations about something, a new technology or a new vaccine. And that's very valid because growing up as a Black individual, you learn about the syphilis study with Tuskegee Airmen. You learn about Henrietta Lacks, where her cancer cells were used and now is used in lots of scientific discoveries, for which her family never got any credit for or any economic, they got no money for that. Didn't get paid. And it was taken without her consent. And so what I wanted to end with is, even though as minority groups, there have been things that were done to our group, and it's not just Black people, Hispanic people, Native American people, there have been a gross amount of forced sterilizations and hysterectomies in women in all of those minority groups. The most recent was in Georgia, actually, at the ICE detention centers in last year, 2020. 57 women in Georgia had a forced hysterectomy while they were in an ICE detention center. So I understand that there is a mistrust sometimes in minority groups about the establishment, in quotes, of medicine, and do we have your best interests at heart? But even though those are valid reservations to have, I also really encourage you to look at cdc.gov. The FDA website has everything on there if you want to look at that. Now, that's a little technical, so cdc.gov is a good place to go if you really want some more good information to compare and contrast the vaccines, to learn about what they do and what they don't do. They can't intertwine with your DNA and mutate it and change it. It doesn't work that way. And it's not a live virus. So it's not injecting coronavirus into your body. That is a myth. That is not how it works. And so I think if you educate yourself, if you make sure that you look at the right resources and not Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or, some ad that just pops up and says, whatever it says. I mean, you have to do your research for yourself in order for you to feel comfortable. But I also, wanted to allay some fears that, yes, there have been things that have happened to minority groups in the past that would cause people to mistrust medicine and technologies. But I would encourage you to not let that interfere with you doing something that could save your life, or certainly the life of somebody that you love.
No doubt, no doubt. I think when COVID first hit, that was like one of my biggest concerns. Not necessarily that I would, be hurt myself, but that I could get it and possibly pass it on to someone else and they pass away.
Right.
So I totally feel you on that. One more question before we get you out of here. I know you mentioned as far as like we may be so this may not be our last set of shots, in your opinion. You think this is going to
no. I think this will be one that we'll have to get some boosters. I don't know when. I mean, I think the time will tell how long each vaccine immunity lasts. So that's with all vaccines. Gotcha. So, when we first rolled out the chickenpox vaccine, I think kids got one shot. And then they came out later and was like, oh, no, the immunity wanes, so we have to give another shot. We got to give a booster shot. And so whenever you have children and they go to the pediatrician and get their shots, these vaccine schedules have been, studied over years and decades and years and years and decades and decades. And so it will take time for us to actually eventually know how long these vaccines will keep our immunity. And when that knowledge is gained, then we'll know what the time frame is when we'll have to get more shots. And so that's with any shot. That's not just coronavirus. So for flu, you have to get your flu shot every year. There's different strains. They put 2 strains from strain A and 2 strains from strain B and mix them up and give you your flu vaccine every year. And so that's the quadrivalent, meaning 4 things are in the vaccine, 4 strains are in the vaccine. And so I think at some point we'll figure out how long these vaccines will last. Hopefully, they'll last a long time. But, because listen, I don't want that headache again.
No doubt.
So I'm, keeping my fingers crossed that it's a long time before you have to get a booster. But yeah, only time will tell, and research will let us know that as time goes on.
Now you got me wondering if I actually took the chickenpox shot, because I remember in 8th grade at Williams Middle School, I got the chicken pox and I gave it to damn near everybody in 8th grade.
Except me, because I've never had chicken pox before.
You lucky. I had it.
I know.
I had it bad, man. I probably didn't get that shot, but anyway.
No, I don't think it was out back then.
Well, I got the cure. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, I wouldn't have Sharice's BFF on here, you know. And folks, she is Sharice's BFF. She's no longer my BFF, but you know, I'm glad that she took time out of her busy schedule to come kick it on my podcast. This has been dope.
Yeah, it was really fun. I was a little nervous, but you know, this was. Man. Yeah, it was. You know, anytime you
molecular trichology and
no, come on.
Stuff. You know all of
no, I just want to make sure that I'm, you know, giving accurate information, and you know, that's as scientists and doctors, that's what we strive to do. And so I wanted to make sure that even though we were going to have a lighthearted conversation, this was a serious, right. As AK say, a serious matter. And so I wanted to make sure that I dealt with it with the gravity that it deserved. Ski-wee, my sorors. Yeah.
That's going to do it for us. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. So for Dr. Jimmell Felder, I am your boy 12 Kyle. We'll catch you guys on the next go round. Five G's.